Me? Well, good morning and welcome to our video today. My name is Peter Frank. I'm the manager of Concordia Technology Solutions here at Concordia Publishing House. Thank you for joining once again. This is our weekly video, and we talk about things about how to leverage technology in your ministry. Now, last week we had a much more theoretical conversation about androids and do we become less human as we interact with them. Some pretty heavy stuff. Anytime we talk with Bill, that's what it's about, the heavy topics. Today we're going to go much more practical, and it's always great to get back to the basics. And the topic for today may seem like it doesn't apply to you if you're a smaller church, and I would caution you to not take that approach yet, because there's a lot of great practical principles that we're going to be talking about today that can be used for churches of any size. But we're going to be talking about communicating with your staff at a multi-site church. And there's not a lot of multi-site churches within the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, but it's a growing number. And we've got a special guest today that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I'm joined by Andrew Osborne. Andrew is the Director of Worship Arts at Cornerstone Lutheran Church in Fishers, Indiana. Andrew, thanks for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming out on a busy week. It sounds like you guys have just a lot of different things going on this summer. Would you say that you're
Yeah,
on
we're
this
staying
week?
packed.
Yeah,
This week we're doing our Fine Arts Academy. It's like a sort of like a VBS sort of camp, but for art. So there's like painting and acting, and I'm teaching a videography class. And then we have like a morning and evening chapel. So I'm doing the technology for both of those. So it's a
man,
busy week.
glad they're keeping you busy there.
Yeah, they're trying.
And last week, VBS in morning and in the evening, you said?
Yeah. Our morning had about 300 kids at it, and then our evening, we try to do a family VBS also so that parents can come with their kids in the evening. And I think we had like 40 families for that. So it was
Oh
pretty
my
packed then
goodness.
also.
That's crazy. Well, for those of you who may remember this, or for those of you who don't remember this, Andrew used to be on the CTS team as a content specialist and needed to get back into the ministry. That itch was too great. And so it's always great hearing how you are using the gifts that you have to bless the church. So thanks for doing that, and again for being here to talk about that today. And so our topic today
Absolutely.
really goes into what some of the challenges that you are facing there. It's not a bad thing that you guys have a multi-site congregation with lots of activities going on, but let's talk about some of the challenges that come with that, at being in a large church setting with multiple locations.
Yeah, and just to clarify or to add to what you were saying a little bit ago, a lot of smaller churches may not even think that this applies to them, but I would think in the next several years, as church sizes are going down and costs are going up and budgets are tight, a lot of churches are going to need to form partnerships where it's sort of like a multi-site, even if it's not technically that. So learning how to communicate with other congregations or other pastors or other church workers of any kind is always a key thing to do. But as you asked about challenges with a multi-site, and there are quite a few of them. It can be a real challenging thing to keep everybody on the same page. Um, Having a church, every church has a different culture, the way they do things, whether or not we're in the hymnal or not. Even just the way we live our lives and work with each other is different, and every community is different. So for us here, we have a site in Carmel, a site in Fishers, and then a site in downtown Indianapolis. And each of those communities has different people and different types of activities going on and different needs and different challenges. So shaping our ministry around what the community needs, and trying to be Christ-like to those people, it looks a little different in each community. So trying to stay on the same page can be hard sometimes because you have to tweak what you're doing in your congregation to fit the needs of the community. I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge.
That makes a lot of sense. I didn't think about it in that way, but you are taking these different church cultures and trying to work together because I know one of the things that you do at Cornerstone, which I'll talk about in a minute, is leveraging the gifts of individuals at multiple sites. It's not just that each church site has their own staff, it's that the group of sites has a staff that does different things. And so that's really what makes communication a challenge. Talk to us a little bit about that. What are some of those communication challenges that you face?
Yeah. So when we're trying to plan out sermon series or how we're going to work in the pericopes and things like that, it can be a challenge to know to try to stay on the same page in certain aspects, whereas we also want to give the pastors freedom to kind of shape their own sermon. So just communicating that and knowing how far we should communicate and how much we should allow them to build their own service for their community, that can be a challenge. Making sure that the people at each site have what they need for each Sunday service can be a challenge. A lot of the preparations for the services happen at our Carmel site, whereas I'm at our Fisher site, and I need to receive a lot of the bulletin and all of the information that I need to put on the slides from the Carmel site. So we have to stay in good communication with each other, so I can receive that. And if there's something missing, I have to be able to get back and forth with the people over at the Carmel site and just make sure we're all on the same page with that.
Very good. Do you find that there's things that are lost in translation as you go about it from a technology perspective? I mean, as opposed to working side by side somebody?
Yeah, that can happen sometimes. A lot of times things will be sent via email, but we get a lot of emails obviously because we had like 40 people on our staff. So sifting through that and finding the information you need, again, some of it sometimes gets lost. So I'll be looking for information about like the pastor sends me his sermon slides, and I'll be looking for those, and I can't find them anywhere. So I go to him and I say, "Hey, I need your slides," and he's like, "I emailed them to you a week ago." And so just trying to make sure we're communicating and saving everything in the correct spot and knowing where everything is, and staying organized can be a challenge.
Gotcha. Well, you wrote a blog post for us about this, and I'm going to go ahead and share that in the comments there for people to look at. But in the blog post, you provided some solutions for facing these challenges. And so let's talk through a few of those here. The first one we're going to talk through is the clear delineation of duties. And I think you even put in here, this seems like a no-brainer, but how can having multiple sites blur the lines with the delineation of duties and make it a challenge to know who's doing what?
Yeah. Well, this isn't necessarily, it doesn't have to do with technology all that much, but it's probably the most important or first step for most congregations who are trying to spread out their staff and make sure that everything's getting covered at the same time. One of the challenges we have is I'm the worship director at our Fisher site, but I also have other tasks that I'm assigned, such as we do midweek videos where the pastor creates a video to share, kind of tying the two Sundays together, and putting that out on Facebook so that people can have more content coming to them throughout the week. And so that doesn't necessarily fit under my role as worship director, but it's something that I help out with, and I do a lot of the videos here at the church. And so knowing what's my responsibility when it comes to the videos and putting it up on social media, it's important for me to be in contact and communication with our communications director, who's really in charge of that area, and working with him to know what does he need from me, what is he going to do, and how do we work together on that. So just having clear lines of communication and knowing this is your job and this is my job and this is where I'm going to help you out. It can be a challenge, but it's as long as you're talking through those things and you know who's responsible for what, it really clears things up.
Why do you think it's so difficult to do that in the church? I mean, we talk about people wearing multiple hats all the time, and we hear from our customers that that's a challenge. Why do you think it is difficult to have that clear delineation? Is it just that people are wanting to help out or don't know what they're supposed to do? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's just like any organization. There are people who want to do too much and they're stepping on other people's toes, or you don't realize you're supposed to be doing something and someone expects you to do it and the ball gets dropped. So it can be a challenge to know this is what I'm supposed to do, this is what you're supposed to do. And having that clear communication really clears that up.
Okay. Well, let's move into the second suggestion you have here. And I'm sure a lot of people cringe at the thought of another meeting, but you talk about how regular staff meetings is a key solution to clearing up some of these communication challenges. Tell us about how you do that at Cornerstone there. What's your schedule like? What's a typical meeting look like for your staff meetings?
Well, first of all, I should clarify that I'm an extrovert and I enjoy being with people. So meetings aren't really a problem for me. But I understand that a lot of people don't like going to more meetings, and it can be a burden to have another meeting to go to each week. But for us, it kind of keeps us all on the same page. We're in the same room together. I drive over to the Carmel site, which is 25 minutes away, and we meet usually once or twice a week. Our Fisher site, we meet a lot more often because we all kind of work together and we could talk through things there on the site. But we want to make sure that across the multi-site, we're all kind of on the same page. So we try to have regular meetings. We have full staff meetings, so all 40 of us get together usually once a month to talk through kind of where we're going, what we've been doing, and how things have been working, and just to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction. But then we have more like bi-weekly meetings. So every other week, we'll meet with our worship team. So the pastors and the worship leaders, we all kind of get together to plan out the series and the different worship aspects for our congregation for the next year. We'll try to plan out ahead so that we can be working on things and getting ahead and not kind of trying to catch up all the time. But if we weren't meeting together in the same room, like I said, a lot of those communications would be dropped via email and things like that. So being together, we can kind of look through and say, okay, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going.
How do you handle the communication in between meetings, like deciding whether you should wait for the meeting or get that answer now? Do you have any kind of set criteria for that, or how you go about doing that?
We don't necessarily have too much set criteria, but we do try to, in each meeting, we say, all right, for next month or next week's meeting, you're going to be in charge of planning this. So go do some research and try to have a proposal for us for this meeting. So we try to have little assignments for people so that we can be doing work in between. And then we do communicate via email or text all the time just to make sure that we're on the right page with things. And if we have questions about where we're going or what we're trying to do, we communicate that way. So we use email a lot just to bounce ideas off each other.
Okay, good. Well, let's get into that digital realm now and talk about some of these technology tools that could be helpful to churches as they're communicating across multiple sites. You listed 3 different things there. The first one, which of course always makes us proud, is Church 360 Unite. Tell us a little bit about Church 360 Unite and how that can be used. And since you are not an employee of CTS anymore, it won't be a sales pitch or anything like that. But tell us about Unite and how that can help churches.
Fortunately for you guys, I just actually do like the software, so that's kind of nice. Well, it's nice to have software where you can create different layers within the software. So with Church 360 Unite, you can create a group on there, and you can have certain pages within that group that, like in the blog, I use the example for youth ministry. A youth director can have pages where the youth can go and they can access the calendar and they can access different events coming up and things like that, and they can have discussions on there. But then you can also have a different layer for just your volunteers that's hidden from the youth or is locked from them. So the volunteers and you as the director can go in there and kind of discuss things that are going on and how you can be working with people, and you can share files within there that are locked that the students wouldn't be able to access if they're details that you don't want them to get to. And then you can even have files that are just locked for you personally where you are storing your things. So it's nice having those different layers where you can make available to certain people certain aspects of the website, but then have it reserved for other people in other areas.
That's excellent. Great description of that. So thanks for bringing that up. I think Unite is a fantastic tool that, so often we think of it just as a website builder, but it's so much more than that. And it's
Exactly.
designed to help with that communication. Now, the
Yeah.
next thing you mentioned really surprised me because I know you're a Mac guy, and we've had many discussions about that. And one day I'll convince you to move over to Androids.
Yeah.
But
I don't think so.
you mentioned Microsoft Office 365, which of course ties back to Windows. Very different than Apple products, but you guys use that there. It sounds like, and there's a component of that I'm not real familiar with. Teams, I believe. Tell us about how you utilize Office 365.
Yeah, to be honest, when it comes to online tools like that, I would probably be more of a Google person. And I see Google as more in between PC and Mac.
There you go.
But here at Cornerstone, we use Office 365, right? Yeah,
Yep.
Office 365. Um, and we use that for like our email client and certain things like that. But then we use, like you said, Teams, which is another tool of theirs. And that's a place where we can kind of, it's sort of like a hub for all of our information. So we can have different areas where our worship directors can go in there and insert information about the music we want to use for services, and the pastors can have on that same page in a different column um, the information about where they're going to take the sermon or what text they're using and things like that. So we can kind of all collaborate using that software and find the information we need rather than trying to hunt down or contact people trying to get that information. We all try to upload it to there so we can just look at one place and find all of it. It's kind of, like I said, it's a hub for us all to go to keep everything kind of together.
Very cool. Well, I haven't used Teams before, but I know it's similar to the third tool that you've mentioned, which is something that we use, not just every day, like constantly throughout the day here at Concordia, is Slack. Tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about Slack and what kind of tool that is and how churches could use it.
Yeah, I love Slack. It's mainly it's a communications tool, so it's instant messaging, but it's so much more than that. Like you said, you can do live chats with people. You can upload files back and forth and share those with each other. It has a really good search function. So if someone shared something with you a long time ago and you're trying to find it, you can just type in the keyword and it'll pop down a list of things that you can choose from. So it's just a really handy tool to have, especially if you're communicating with people at different sites or at CPH at different levels of the building. Rather than trying to hunt people down, you can communicate with them on there and share things via Slack. And it's just, again, it's another way where we can come together and have a common place where we're going to share ideas and things like that.
Very cool. And the thing that all three of these have in common is that ability to have multiple users connected in the same location digitally when they're not connected physically in the same location, and whether that's staff or volunteers, which I think is really cool. So we've only scratched the surface on communication tools that multi-sites can use, but I appreciate your insight on these three. You wrap up the blog post with a kind of a note of encouragement for the readers, and that's to try new things. Can you share your final thoughts on that and why it's important to try new things when it comes to communication?
Yeah, absolutely. So all three of the softwares I mentioned, I had not used prior to maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but now they're things that I use regularly or that I did use regularly at my work, and they're tools that I probably wouldn't have sought out by myself, but because someone introduced me to them, I realized, oh, these are really handy tools, and they it's a scratch that I have. So just being willing to try new software. Software is changing rapidly all the time. There's new technology coming out, different ways to communicate with each other and to stay organized. So you just go on the App Store on your computer and find apps that sound like maybe they would help out with a certain area that you're struggling in, staying organized or something like that. I'm not a very organized person, so I have to have tools like Office 365 that I'm able to find exactly what I need and put it in the right spot, and it just helps me stay organized that way. So being willing to search out for those things and asking people, what do you use? How do you stay organized in this way? How do you fulfill this need that you have, and being willing to try them out, and if they don't work, you move on to something else, and it doesn't have to be a huge deal, but just taking the risk and giving something a shot can be super helpful.
I love that last point about you don't have to commit to something. Try it out, and if it doesn't work, then leave it alone. And I think we hear that a lot, where people are, afraid of change and trying new things because they're not sure they want to use it in the long term. And that's the great thing with technology today is you can try it, and if you don't like it, move on to the next thing, and there's no harm. So
Right.
well,
Even for paid software, there's usually a demo for it, so you can at least try it out and then move on if it doesn't work out the way you need it to.
it's so hard to evaluate things without things like software without actually trying them and using them in your day-to-day work too. So great. Well, as always, Andrew, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you very much for your insight in here. Thanks for the blog post, and pray God's blessings as you go through these crazy next few weeks with full days at the church and wearing those multiple hats like you have.
I'm glad to do it.
All right. Well, to our guests today, to our viewers, thank you for joining us. Please tune in next week. We're going to continue talking about communication, but in a different sense. We're going to be talking about social media and how young adults are using social media today. It used to be that, in the world of Facebook, it was all college students, and that's really shifted. And now Facebook is seen as the place where older people go, older people like me in their 30s and above. So what are young adults doing these days? How are they utilizing social media? That's a question we get quite frequently. And so we're going to talk about that. So please tune in next week at 11:30 Central Time, and we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.